the battle between DeWanna Bonner, Alyssa Thomas versus A'ja Wilson. Question. Are we talking about 3 of the 4 most unlikable athletes that this league has to offer? Question mark? In one damn finals?
Game 2 of the WNBA Finals was supposed to be a statement night for A'ja Wilson, the reigning MVP, the face of the Las Vegas Aces, and the league's golden star. But instead of roaring crowds and packed stands, what she saw left her furious. Empty seats, rows of silence, cameras struggling to find energy in an arena that looked half asleep. And when the frustration boiled over, Wilson didn't hold back. Reports and whispers from courtside suggest she turned her anger toward one name, Caitlin Clark, the rookie sensation who wasn't even there yet, whose absence haunted the finals like a ghost. Because deep down, everyone knew the truth. When Clark isn't playing, fans aren't watching. And for A'ja Wilson, that realization cut deep. Not just as an athlete, but as a superstar suddenly reminded how fragile her spotlight really is.
Well, I got some bad news. Number one, I don't think none of y'all are doing any pre-WNBA prep. I don't think none of y'all are fired up for no games. None of that. In fact, I believe y'all don't care. I think y'all care about the drama around it. I do believe that. But I don't think you care about the events itself. Holy hell, there's $35 seats right there. Right there. Plenty of good seats available. $46, $42. Neither does anybody else. Wow. If ever there was proof that the Caitlin Clark fans / Fever fans are now the overwhelming majority of the fandom, look at ticket prices for finals games.
It was supposed to be the crown jewel of the WNBA season, Game 2 of the finals. The Aces were defending their title, A'ja Wilson was in her prime, and the league had been pushing the new era of women's basketball narrative for months. Yet, as the lights dimmed and cameras panned across the stands, something was painfully obvious. The seats weren't full. In fact, many were completely empty. Even broadcasters seemed hesitant to zoom out too far, knowing the optics would only confirm what fans online had already started to notice. Nobody came. Social media was ruthless. Photos of entire rows left vacant spread within minutes, with captions mocking, "Historic moment, if you can find the fans." The supposed showdown between Wilson's Aces and Alyssa Thomas's son suddenly looked like a scrimmage. Even the arena staff seemed disengaged. The energy that defines championship basketball just wasn't there. The sound system blasted music, cheer squads danced, but it all felt forced, like the league was trying to manufacture excitement that the crowd simply didn't feel. A'ja Wilson could sense it too. Athletes feed off the crowd, the chants, the adrenaline, the noise. But when she looked up and saw patches of empty gray seats, her intensity turned to irritation. How could a finals game, a culmination of months of work, feel this hollow? How could a league that claimed to be growing still struggle to fill arenas for its biggest stage? For someone as competitive as Wilson, the sight wasn't just disappointing, it was humiliating. Then came the comparison that stung even more. Fans online began posting screenshots of Fever home games earlier in the season when Caitlin Clark played sold-out arenas, scalped tickets going for hundreds, energy that shook the Gaged. If the Fever and Caitlin Clark was playing in a finals game, let's say against the Mercury, with all that drama around there, would there be a single ticket less than $300? And now, the league's most important matchup couldn't sell out even with the defending champs on court. The message was loud and clear. Without Clark, the buzz evaporated. Commentators tried to stay positive, focusing on elite defense and strong fundamentals, but everyone knew what the story really was: the silence. The league's ratings department surely felt the panic setting in, as even casual fans tuned out once they realized Clark wasn't there. The WNBA had banked heavily on its veterans, carrying the finals, but they underestimated how quickly fans had shifted their loyalty. They weren't following teams anymore. They were following Caitlin Clark, and for A'ja Wilson, that realization burned her. This was supposed to be her league, her finals, her moment to prove she didn't need the rookie from Indiana to draw attention. But as the seats stayed empty and the noise faded, Wilson's expression said it all. Frustration, confusion, and maybe even fear that her reign as the face of the league was slipping away. The finals were happening, but the spotlight had already moved on.
This should scare the league to death. With DeWanna Bonner, Alyssa Thomas, and the Mercury in the finals against A'ja Wilson and the Aces, will you be locked in watching this series? Question mark. Yes or no? Hit the poll. 4% of brave souls said yes. 96% said hail to the no.
By the middle of the second quarter, cameras caught A'ja Wilson looking visibly irritated, not just at the scoreboard, but at everything around her. Missed shots, low energy, a crowd that couldn't care less. Every basket felt like a chore. Every timeout like an unwanted reminder that this finals was missing its spark. Then came the breaking point. According to several courtside sources, Wilson was seen slamming her towel, shouting in frustration, and even taking subtle shots at the league's obsession with Caitlin Clark. Her message was clear. She believed all the hype around her. Clark had stolen attention away from everyone else, even during the championship. It wasn't the first time Wilson hinted at resentment. Earlier in the season, she spoke about the media imbalance, saying how exhausting it was to constantly hear Clark's name in every conversation. But this time, it hit differently. The silence in the arena made her words echo louder. She could blame the fans, the marketing, or even the scheduling. But deep down, she knew what was really bothering her, that Clark had changed the WNBA forever, and not necessarily in a way that benefited her. Fans on social media noticed her attitude immediately. Tweets poured in saying A'ja is mad at the wrong person, and don't blame Caitlin because no one wants to watch this boring final. Others pointed out that while Wilson was busy venting, Clark had never once complained about media pressure, even while carrying the Fever spotlight all season. The contrast was striking: one player demanding recognition, the other earning it naturally. As the game went on, Wilson's emotions became part of the storyline. Commentators mentioned her fire and passion, but fans saw something else: insecurity. Every time the camera zoomed in on her face after a missed rebound or a bad call, the frustration was raw. She wasn't just fighting her opponents, she was fighting an invisible shadow, the ghost of Caitlin Clark's popularity. Meanwhile, Clark's name trended online the entire night, even though she wasn't playing. Fans joked that Clark had outsold the finals without stepping on the court. It was harsh, but true. The WNBA's biggest night couldn't compete with the buzz surrounding someone sitting at home in Indianapolis. That irony must have been unbearable for Wilson, who had spent her career proving herself as one of the most dominant forces in women's basketball. But anger can be blinding. Instead of embracing the moment and winning new fans through performance, Wilson's frustration became a headline. The league needed her to lead with grace, but what viewers saw was an athlete losing composure. And as she kept glancing toward those empty seats, one thought seemed to linger behind every grimace. Maybe the fans weren't the problem. Maybe they were simply following the player who made them believe again.
Guys, if the Fever and Caitlin Clark was playing in a finals game, let's say against the Mercury, with all that drama around there, would there be a single ticket less than $300? Now, honestly, a single ticket less than $300. I don't think so. I think you'd have courtside seats go for $5,000. You are not invested. You are not interested in watching this BS transpire on your television set.
Even though Caitlin Clark wasn't anywhere near the court, her presence dominated Game 2 like a ghost the WNBA couldn't escape. Every conversation online eventually circled back to her name. When someone posted a clip of A'ja Wilson's frustration, the replies weren't about defense or shooting percentages, they were about Clark. Fans wrote things like, if Caitlyn were playing, this place would be packed, or this finals feels like preseason without her, and they weren't wrong. The contrast between Clark's impact and what the league was offering now couldn't have been clearer. Throughout the regular season, Clark had turned every arena into a spectacle. People who had never watched women's basketball before were suddenly buying jerseys, filling arenas, and driving record-breaking TV ratings. She didn't just bring attention, she brought belief. But with her out, the league looked exposed. The excitement, the energy, the viral moments, they were gone. It was as if Clark had taken the heartbeat of the WNBA with her when the Fever season ended. That's the part Aja Wilson couldn't ignore. For years, she had been the face of the league. She'd won MVPs, carried her team to championships, and stood as the example of consistency. Yet none of it brought the kind of cultural wave that Caitlin Clark created in a single rookie season. That kind of reality doesn't sit easily with any superstar, especially one as competitive as Wilson. Watching the finals draw half-empty arenas while Clark's name trended worldwide had to sting on a personal level, and the league didn't help. The WNBA had gone Ulin on Clark from day one, capitalizing on her media draw, while older stars grew resentful. Wilson, Bonner, and Thomas were pushed into the background, whether they admitted it or not. The frustration that erupted in Game 2 wasn't just about attendance, it was about hierarchy. For the first time, Wilson wasn't the center of the league's orbit, Clark was, and that shift was shaking the very foundation of how WNBA players saw themselves in the spotlight. Even commentators quietly hinted at the elephant in the room. One analyst mentioned that a finals without Clark feels like a missed opportunity. A rare on-air acknowledgement of what everyone was thinking. Fans didn't tune in for stats or strategy. They tuned in for stories, for emotion, for connection. And right now, the league's biggest emotional hook was sitting on the sidelines. The night ended not with celebration, but with questions. Was the WNBA ready to handle what Clark had unleashed? Could it survive when its biggest draw wasn't even in the final? For Aja Wilson, the answer was hard to face. She could outscore anyone on the floor, but she couldn't outshine the one player who had changed the league's entire ecosystem without touching the ball that night. When the league released its early viewership numbers for Game 2, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Ratings were down sharply from the semifinals that featured Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Social media exploded with disbelief. Not because people expected record highs, but because the finals had plummeted to numbers that looked closer to preseason broadcasts. To many fans, it was proof of what they had been saying all season. The WNBA had built all its hype on Clark, and without her, there was nothing left to hold it up. Across Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit, the comments were relentless. "I didn't even know the finals started," one fan joked. Another wrote, "They should have invited Caitlyn to sit courtside. Maybe that would fill the seats." The humor was biting, but honest. Even die-hard basketball supporters admitted they hadn't watched. The finals, the supposed climax of months of competition, had become invisible in the sports conversation. A viral poll captured just how bad it was. Out of thousands of respondents, only a tiny fraction, less than 5%, said they were watching. 95% said no, many adding that they only tuned in when Clark played. It wasn't apathy, it was rejection. The fans were sending a message. They wanted entertainment, energy, and connection, not the politics and attitude that had overtaken the league's older stars. The comments section under highlight videos told the same story. People weren't arguing about who might win the championship. They were mocking the idea that it mattered. "I'd rather watch paint dry," one user wrote. "Wake me when Caitlyn's back." Another added. Some went even further, saying the finals looked like a charity event no one showed up. The atmosphere around the league had shifted from celebration to embarrassment. Inside the WNBA offices, that must have stung. The league had spent years trying to prove it could stand on its own, that it didn't need a savior figure to draw attention. But the moment Clark stepped away, the illusion crumbled. Even sponsors seemed quieter. The buzz, the celebrity shoutouts, the crossover moments, all gone. The finals were supposed to be a showcase of talent, yet all anyone could talk about was who wasn't there. For Aja Wilson, that reality must have felt personal. She'd fought her way to the top, earned every accolade, and now stood in front of half-empty stands while the world tuned out. Fans who once praised her dominance were now comparing her legacy to Clark's rookie season. The crowd's absence wasn't just about poor marketing, it was a reflection of how disconnected the league had become from its audience. By the end of Game 2, the silence spoke louder than the buzzer. The WNBA Finals had officially become background noise, and for players like Aja Wilson, that silence wasn't just disappointing, it was devastating.
If Caitlin Clark was playing, if she was in these finals along with the Fever, now you know why we conveniently did not hear anything about the ankle, blah, 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 and I won't be coming back until the season was basically over. The WNBA was very aware of what that was going to do to ticket prices, etc.
While the WNBA hoped Game 2 would spark drama on the court, the real action unfolded online, and it wasn't flattering. Fans didn't just ignore the finals, they turned it into a running joke. Memes flooded every platform, poking fun at the empty seats, the forced hype, and the awkward energy inside the arena. One viral post read, "You could literally hear the basketball bounce. That's how quiet it was." Another added, "These finals sound like a church scrimmage." It wasn't just light teasing, it was public humiliation for a league desperate to appear thriving. Comment sections on ESPN and eBleacher Report became comedy hubs. Fans compared ticket prices to fast food combos, saying, "For the cost of one final seat, you can buy 2 Big Macs and still have change." Some joked about Aja Wilson being so mad she might start blaming Caitlin Clark for the weather, while others claimed the loudest cheer of the night came from the cleaning crew. Every punchline underscored the same truth. The WNBA's biggest event had lost credibility. Even rival athletes subtly joined the conversation. A few NBA players liked posts mocking the attendance numbers, while others shared clips of the atmosphere with crying laugh emojis. It was savage but telling when even fellow professionals are laughing. You know the problem runs deep. The finals weren't commanding respect anymore. They had become the butt of the sports world's joke. And for Aja Wilson, that spotlight was unbearable. She thrives on energy, thrives on being the center of competition. But this kind of attention wasn't what she wanted. Instead of headlines about her dominance, the trending tags were about fan apathy and ticket giveaways. Photos of half-empty sections were captioned, "Sold out event" with sarcastic hashtags. Even loyal fans started questioning how the league claimed growth while failing to fill arenas for its championship series. The irony is that Wilson's frustration only fueled the ridicule. Clips of her slamming her towel or muttering under her breath were shared thousands of times, edited with dramatic sound effects and captions like Aja, realizing no one's watching. What could have been an inspiring finals moment became a meme factory. The internet turned her emotional meltdown into entertainment. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's name stayed trending. Again, people drew comparisons. Posting side-by-side photos of her Fever games, packed to capacity versus the ghost town of Game 2. "One player is the league," one user wrote bluntly. "The rest are just renting space." The comment got millions of views because it captured what everyone felt, but few had said so plainly by the end of the night. What should have been a showcase of women's basketball became an online roast. The jokes didn't stop after the buzzer, they multiplied overnight. The league's biggest stars were now memes, and the finals had been reduced to punchlines. For Aja Wilson, the laughter was deafening. As the memes kept circulating and the jokes piled up, something deeper began to unravel, a clash between ego and reality. For years, Aja Wilson had carried herself as the undisputed face of the WNBA. She had the accolades, the endorsements, the charisma, and the confidence to match. But during these finals, none of that seemed to matter. The empty seats, the lukewarm headlines, and the wave of online mockery hit at her pride. To many fans, it wasn't just bad luck, it was karma. The arrogance that had once been applauded was now being exposed under the harshest spotlight possible. Public indifference. Aja had built her image around dominance and confidence, but those traits often blurred into something the audience saw as entitlement. Fans remembered her dismissive tone in interviews, her subtle digs at Caitlin Clark, and her tendency to make every controversy about respect. Now that same attitude seemed out of touch. When Wilson appeared irritated during post-game interviews, people didn't see passion, they saw a superstar who couldn't handle the truth that fans had moved on. League had marketed Wilson as the leader of the new era, yet it was Clark who had delivered that promise. Clark didn't need attitude, she brought results. She didn't need to demand attention, she earned it through performance and humility. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Wilson's intensity once inspired admiration, now it drew eye rolls. When she spoke about haters or critics, the public saw someone blaming everyone but herself. Even some of her peers began to distance themselves. Inside the locker rooms, whispers grew louder about how certain veterans were more focused on narrative battles than improving the product on the court. Younger players who looked up to Wilson began admiring Clark's discipline instead, her focus on the game, not the noise. The balance of influence was shifting, and Wilson could feel it slipping away. What made it worse was that her frustration only fed the cycle. Every time she expressed anger or defiance, social media twisted it into more content. Her every scowl became a meme, her every complaint a satire. She had lost control of her story. The more she pushed back, the more detached fans became. Instead of rooting for her, they mocked her struggles as proof that humility mattered more than headlines. By Game 2's end, it wasn't about stats or scores anymore. It was about perception, and Wilson was losing that battle. The world wasn't rallying behind the defending MVP. They were rallying behind the idea of change. The WNBA had entered a new chapter, one where charisma wasn't enough and ego wasn't admired. For A'ja Wilson, that realization was devastating. She was still one of the league's greatest players, but greatness means little when the crowd no longer believes you represent.
I can't wait to see the ratings for this, because I did, by the way, I did see where that semifinals game against the Aces and the Fever drew like 1.8 million viewers, I think, is what it was. Will they get half of that for this finals? Will they get half of the viewership for this finals?
As the ridicule reached full steam, one question began to dominate fan discussions. Where was Cathy Engelbert, the WNBA Commissioner who had proudly taken credit for the league's supposed historic growth, suddenly went silent? There were no statements about attendance, no words about the finals' empty seats, and no acknowledgement of the backlash swirling online. For a league that prided itself on transparency and empowerment, that silence spoke volumes. Fans saw it as evasion, the kind that only made things worse. Engelbert's absence during the most embarrassing moment of the WNBA season didn't just frustrate viewers, it infuriated them. Many remembered how vocal she had been when ratings soared during Caitlin Clark's breakout months, how quickly she praised the new wave of fans coming into the game. But now, when those same fans had vanished from the finals, she had nothing to say. The narrative was falling apart, and instead of taking accountability, the league appeared to hide behind PR silence. Social media users called it out mercilessly. She was loud when Clark was selling tickets. One user wrote, "But quiet now that her stars can't fill the stands." Others mocked Engelbert's spin tactics, pointing to the league's past habit of announcing sellouts despite visible empty seats on camera. One fan quipped, "Maybe the invisible fans just didn't make it through security." The sarcasm wasn't just funny, it was furious. People felt deceived, like the league had been selling an illusion, rather than addressing its real problems. The frustration extended to the players too. Even loyal WNBA supporters began demanding accountability, arguing that Engelbert had failed to manage the generational transition the league desperately needed. By allowing resentment toward Caitlin Clark to fester among veterans, she had created a divided locker room and a fractured fan base. The finals were now paying the price for that lack of leadership. Instead of uniting behind a powerful brand of competition, the league looked petty, insecure, and leaderless. Meanwhile, A'ja Wilson's public tantrums only deepened the optics crisis. What should have been a display of championship focus became a spectacle of frustration, a mirror of the league itself, When Wilson looked angry at the crowd, she embodied the disconnect between players and fans. When she ignored questions about Clark, it symbolized the WNBA's denial of its own reality. And when Engelbert stayed silent through it all, it showed a leadership vacuum at the worst possible time. By the time reporters started asking about fan engagement, it was too late. The finals had already been written off as a flop, and no amount of spin could reverse the perception that the league was collapsing under its own contradictions. Engelbert's silence, Wilson's frustration, and the ghost of Caitlin Clark had all converged into one moment of reckoning. The fans weren't just watching less, they were walking away, and the people in charge didn't seem to know how to stop it. As Game 2's fallout grew impossible to ignore, whispers began circulating through sports media circles that NBA Commissioner Adam Silver was quietly furious. While the NBA has always stood as the financial backbone of the WNBA, Silver's patience was reportedly wearing thin. The finals' embarrassing turnout, coupled with the growing tension among players and fans, had reached a point where the league's credibility was on the line, and Silver knew it. The NBA had invested millions into building the WNBA's reputation as a thriving product. Yet, what he saw in Game 2 looked like regression. Behind the scenes, reports claimed Silver had already begun asking hard questions. How could a league with one of its most dominant superstars, A'ja Wilson, fail to sell tickets for the championship? Why were media headlines focused on drama and jealousy instead of basketball? And most importantly, how had Cathy Engelbert allowed the entire narrative to slip out of her control? For Silver, this wasn't just a PR issue, it was a business failure. Every embarrassing image from Game 2 reflected directly back on the NBA's brand. Executives close to the organization hinted that Silver's office was preparing for what they called a comprehensive review of the WNBA's leadership and marketing direction. Translation: change might be coming. If the league's commissioner couldn't fix its fractured identity, someone else would. Sponsors were beginning to ask questions too. Major partners who had jumped aboard the Caitlin Clark wave wanted assurance that their investment wasn't wasted. After all, they weren't buying into a social experiment. They were buying into a product meant to grow audiences. And right now, that product was failing. For A'ja Wilson and other veterans, this shift in power was sobering. The NBA had been generous in giving the WNBA autonomy, but the finals disaster had exposed what happens when ego outpaces management. While players like Wilson demanded respect, the league's actual foundation, fan trust, was crumbling. The empty stands weren't just about ticket prices, they were a referendum on how disconnected leadership had become from the people who once cared. Silver, ever the pragmatist, wasn't interested in excuses. He understood something the WNBA leadership had forgotten. Star power drives everything. Fans don't just watch games, they follow stories. They follow icons who inspire, unite, and transcend. Caitlin Clark was that story. The one player capable of bringing basketball back into mainstream conversation. Ignoring her impact had been Engelbert's biggest mistake, and Silver wasn't about to let that oversight drag the WNBA down further by the end of the week. Speculation ran wild that Silver might personally step in to restructure the WNBA's leadership if attendance and ratings continued to nosedive. Whether that happens or not, one thing was clear: Game 2 had changed everything. The empty stands weren't just a bad look, they were a wake-up call. For the first time in years, the NBA wasn't just observing the WNBA, it was preparing to take control. Game 2 of the WNBA Finals will be remembered not for the score, but for the silence. A'ja Wilson's visible frustration, the empty seats, and the ghost of Caitlin Clark hovering over everything told a bigger story. One of a league at a crossroads. The WNBA had spent years fighting for relevance, but in the absence of the one player who brought fans back, its flaws were suddenly impossible to hide. Cathy Engelbert's silence to the players' resentment and the fans' indifference combined into a perfect storm of humiliation. And now, with Adam Silver watching closely, the future of the league hangs in the balance. Because this wasn't just a finals, it was a wake-up call. The WNBA can't survive on pride alone. It needs connection, humility, and leadership before the fans who filled arenas for Caitlin Clark disappear for good.